My name is Julian. I am 66 years old. At dinner last night, my daughter-in-law Emily screamed at me in my own home. You either give your master bedroom to my parents, or you get out. She saw me as a senile old man who had nowhere to go. She didn't know that I wasn't just angry. I was strategic. So I bought the massive house directly across the street. And when they saw me waving from my new office window, they didn't just get angry. They fainted. Before I tell you exactly how I executed my plan, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. And please hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that underestimating your elders is a very, very expensive mistake. The invasion didn't start with that dinner. It started months ago quietly in my own backyard. I am a retired civil engineer. For 40 years I designed bridges and commercial structures. I understand stress, load-bearing limits, and foundations. My entire life has been dedicated to making things last. That morning I was in the yard inspecting the solid oak fence I built with my own 2 hands 30 years ago. The joints were still tight. The wood was sound. It was a structure built to endure. I ran my hand over the familiar grain, thinking of the day my late wife Clara and I stained it together. Her laugh still echoed in the wood. Julian. I didn't have to turn around. I knew the voice. Emily, my daughter-in-law. Her tone always carried an edge of impatience, as if the world was constantly failing to keep up with her. She was standing on the patio, staring into her phone, tapping the glass with a perfectly manicured nail. She didn't even look up when she spoke. I've decided. We're tearing down this old fence on Tuesday. Old. That's her favorite word for anything that belongs to me. My furniture is old. My books are old. My memories are old. It doesn't fit the open concept style I'm going for. She continued, still scrolling. I want a tempered glass barrier, something that opens up the view to the new pool. A pool. Of course. Her next project. She talks about it as if money grows on trees, as if my son, her husband, isn't living off my retirement savings. I turned to face her. Emily, I said, my voice calm. That is Clara's fence. She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing in annoyance. Julian, Clara is gone. We have to live in the present. That fence is an eyesore and it's blocking the view. It's lowering the property value. Property value. Her other favorite phrase. She measures everything in dollars, nothing in worth. She couldn't understand that the value of this fence was measured in memories. This house, Clara and I designed it together. Every blueprint, every support beam, every brick for the fireplace. We poured our lives into this foundation. Now it was just a space for Emily to upgrade. And I was just another old fixture she needed to deal with. You must be wondering how I let this happen. 4 years ago, my life collapsed. 2 structures failed at the same time. First, Clara passed away. A sudden, massive heart attack that took her from me in an instant. The silence in this house became a physical weight. 2 weeks later, my son Leo, their only child, lost everything. He had gotten tangled in a bad real estate investment in Arizona. A sure thing, he called it. Emily had pushed him into it. You have to leverage Leo, she'd said. It's what successful people do. I'm a civil engineer. I asked to see the geological surveys. I saw the reports. The land was unstable. The water rights were questionable. I warned him. Leo, a structure cannot be built on sand. This foundation is flawed. Emily had laughed. A light, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Oh, Julian, she'd said, you're so old-fashioned. This isn't about bridges. This is about leverage. It turned out leverage was just a polite word for ruin. They lost their rented penthouse. They lost their 2 luxury cars. They lost every dime. And they showed up on my doorstep right in the depths of my grief. Leo looked broken. Emily looked inconvenienced. My house suddenly felt too big, too empty. I said yes. I thought we would lean on each other. We were family. That was my mistake. temporary, turned into 4 years, and my silence, the quiet grief of a 66-year-old widower, was mistaken for senility. They confused my patience with weakness. They forgot that I spent 40 years designing structures to withstand earthquakes. I understand load-bearing limits better than anyone. And I knew, standing there by that oak fence, that my personal limit was about to be reached. Leo's car pulled into the driveway. He's an accountant, a stable job I helped him get through an old friend after his financial catastrophe. Emily intercepted him at the door before he could even take off his coat. Her voice carried clearly across the yard. "Your father is being difficult about the fence again." I hadn't even argued. I had simply stated a fact. But in Emily's world, my existence was an argument. I saw Leo rub his temples. He always looks tired. He walked out onto the patio, avoiding my eyes. That was his new habit. Avoidance. "Dad," he began, his voice weary. "Can we just let Emily have this one? She watches all those design shows on TV. She has a better eye for this stuff than we do." A better eye. I, who designed the new federal building in Seattle, was being told I didn't have an eye for design. "It's just a fence, Dad," he pleaded, as if I were the one being unreasonable. I looked at my son, the boy I taught to build models of suspension bridges. He was gone. In his place was this shell of a man governed by fear of his wife's displeasure. "Fine, Leo," I said. He let out a breath of relief so obvious it stung. "Thanks, Dad. Thanks. I'll grill some steaks tonight." He hurried back inside, eager to escape the tension. As the door slid shut, I heard Emily's voice, sickly sweet. "See, I told you Julian would understand. He just needs things explained simply." Julian, not Dad. When Emily was present, I was Julian. I was no longer the patriarch of the family. I was a tenant. I was an obstacle. And the invasion was escalating. Emily's parents, Richard and Susan, had arrived 3 months ago. They came for a few days to help comfort Emily for the financial trauma she had endured. They never left. They took over the first-floor guest room, the room Clara used to practice her cello. Now the sound of Richard's television blaring cable news filled the hallway from dawn until midnight. Last week I went to the shed to get my gardening tools. They weren't just any tools. They were a handcrafted carbon steel set from Germany. A retirement gift from Clara, each piece engraved with my initials. I found Richard using my prized trowel to mix a batch of quick-dry cement for a tacky garden gnome. "Hey, Julian," he boomed, not a trace of shame in his voice. "This is great stuff, really sturdy. Better than that junk they sell at Home Depot." The tool was ruined, caked in drying concrete. I spent 2 hours that evening meticulously chipping it away, feeling a cold fury build in my chest. But Susan was the true vandal. My study, my sanctuary, was her next target. This was where I kept my professional life. My awards, my framed blueprints, my engineering library, and all the family photo albums. I walked in one afternoon and froze. The walls were bare. Gone was the photo of me and Clara cutting the ribbon at the opening of the Tacoma Bridge. Gone was my Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Civil Engineers. Gone was the photo of Leo graduating from college. In their place, Susan had hung a series of cheap, mass-produced abstract paintings. Horrible splashes of teal and orange that clashed with the mahogany bookshelves. I frantically opened the closet. She had packed my entire life into cardboard boxes. She'd scrawled on the side of one with a black marker, "Julian's old stuff." When I confronted her, she just gave that light, airy laugh. "Oh, Julian, those things were gathering so much dust. It made the room feel so dismal. We needed to brighten the space, don't worry. I saved them all for you." She saved them. I found the framed photo of Clara and me, the one from our 40th anniversary, shoved in a box underneath a pair of Richard's old golf shoes. They weren't just disrespecting me. They were erasing her. They were acting like owners, and I was just a guest in the house I built. They didn't know one crucial thing about me. A good civil engineer never ever lets a structure be overloaded. He doesn't wait for the collapse. He builds in a contingency plan. The load limit had been reached. The alarm bells were ringing, and my contingency plan was already in motion. The steaks Leo promised were dry and overcooked, but they were the least offensive thing at the dinner table. The air in the dining room was thick with unspoken tension. I could feel the foundation of my own home cracking beneath me. Emily waited until we were all served. She picked up her wineglass, a $50 bottle she had presumably charged to my grocery account. She raised it, a rehearsed, gleaming smile plastered on her face. "I have some wonderful news for everyone," she announced, her voice artificially bright. Leo looked up, a brief, hopeful flicker in his eyes. Perhaps he thought she was pregnant, or had finally found a job. "Mom and Dad have decided to stay with us," she beamed. "Indefinitely, isn't it wonderful? We're finally going to be one big, happy family all under one roof." The word indefinitely landed on the table with a dull thud. It wasn't a visit. It was an occupation. Richard, her father, raised his own glass. "We're just thrilled, Julian, thrilled. We can really help you and Leo get this place properly managed. Help me manage the house I designed and built." Leo's fork clattered against his plate, a sharp metallic sound in the sudden silence. He quickly recovered, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Oh," he said, his voice thin. "Wow, honey. That's great." Then Susan, Emily's mother, set her glass down and let out a long, theatrical sigh. She placed a delicate hand on her lower back, wincing as if in terrible pain. "It's just, Emily dear, that guest room is lovely," she began, her voice a pathetic whine. "But it's on the first floor. The noise from the street is just dreadful. I barely slept a wink." I kept my face neutral. The guest room, Clara's former cello room, was at the back of the house. It faced the serenity of the oak trees in the garden. The only street noise was the sound of crickets. "And the mattress," Susan continued. "It must be 20 years old. My back, oh my poor back. I tossed and turned all night." That mattress was a top-of-the-line Tempur-Pedic. It was 4.5 years old. I knew because I had bought it for Clara, hoping it would ease her own back pain in her final months. "Oh, Mommy, no," Emily said, her face a mask of performative horror. "We can't have you in pain. That's awful." That was the opening Richard had been waiting for. He leaned forward, setting his knife and fork down with deliberate care. He fixed me with a look of practiced, reasonable concern. "Julian," he said, his voice smooth and condescending, "we're all getting on in years. You know how it is. Susan's arthritis, my hip." He was 64, 2 years younger than me. I had seen him on the golf course last weekend, swinging a driver with perfect form. "And that room of yours," he continued, gesturing toward the ceiling, "the master suite. It's just perfect. It's on the second floor, you see, away from all the hustle and bustle. The hustle and bustle of my quiet suburban home. It has that big bay window," Richard pressed on, "the one that overlooks the garden. All that natural light. You know, the doctor said that morning light is crucial for our circadian rhythms, for our well-being." Susan jumped in, her eyes lighting up. "Oh yes, the light. And Julian, your bathroom. It has that walk-in tub. My goodness, that would be an absolute lifesaver for my poor knees. We wouldn't want to be a bother, Julian, but it just makes sense. It makes sense." I looked at them. Richard with his smug, entitled grin. Susan with her fluttering, manipulative helplessness. Emily watching me, her eyes cold and sharp, daring me to refuse. They were talking about my bedroom. Not just my bedroom. My and Clara's bedroom. The room where she took her last breath. The last private space I had in my own home. My sanctuary. They were suggesting in polite, reasonable tones that I, the owner of the house, be evicted from my own room and relegated to the noisy, uncomfortable guest room while these two interlopers took my bed. I turned my head to look at my son. Leo was staring intently at his steak. He was cutting it, and cutting it, and cutting it. He was meticulously shredding the overcooked meat into a pile of gray fibers. He wouldn't look up. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew what they were asking. He knew this was the final, unforgivable line, and he remained silent. He just kept cutting his steak. His silence was his answer. It was his permission. They weren't asking. They were informing. I felt the last structural support in my chest give way. Not with a crash, but with a cold, quiet snap. The anger didn't rise. It focused. It turned into something hard and clear and precise. I looked at Richard. I looked at Susan. Then I looked at Emily. They thought I was a weak old man. They thought my silence was the fog of senility. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten what I build. And they had no idea what I was about to do. The silence at the table stretched, pulling tighter and tighter, until it felt like a high-tension wire ready to snap. Richard and Susan looked at me, their faces masks of fake sympathy, waiting for my response. Emily watched me with the predatory stillness of a hawk. And Leo, my son, just kept staring at his plate. He hadn't just shredded his steak. He was now meticulously pushing the small gray fibers into a pile on one side of his plate, as if it were the most important task in the world. He was building a wall of denial, one piece of ruined meat at a time. His refusal to look up, his refusal to speak, was louder than any shout. It was an abdication. Emily saw it too. A small, triumphant smile touched the corner of her mouth. She had won. Her husband would not defy her. Her parents would get what they wanted. She set her wine glass down on the table. The sharp click of the glass against the oak dining table cut through the silence. It was a sound of finality, a judge's gavel. "Julian," she said. Her voice was no longer pleading or suggestive. It was cold, hard, and final. The business voice she used when closing a deal. "The reality is this." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, ensuring she had my complete, undivided attention. "My parents need your room. Their health is paramount. And you're perfectly healthy. You can handle the stairs." I just looked at her. I didn't speak. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an argument. "So," she continued, "you can move your things into the old office in the basement. It's perfectly serviceable." The basement. My office. Not just a serviceable room. It was my professional sanctuary. It was where I kept my drafting table, my reference library, my 40 years of professional work. It was a climate-controlled, well-lit space I had designed for myself. But it was still a basement. It was underground. It was where you put things you wanted to forget. She was quite literally burying me. "That way," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Mom and Dad can have the master suite, and you still have your own space downstairs. It's the perfect solution for everyone." Leo flinched. His hand tightened on his fork. He knew what that room meant to me. He knew it was my last refuge, the one place Susan hadn't yet dared to reorganize. Emily saw his flinch, and she decided in that instant to deliver the killing blow, to cut the last rope. She turned back to me, her smile widening. "In fact," she said, her voice casual, "I already took the liberty of getting things started. I had a service come in this morning to clear out some of the clutter. You know, to make room for your bed." My blood ran cold. "Clutter," I managed to say. The word felt thick in my mouth. "Yes," she said, sipping her wine. "All those old blueprints and drawings you had hanging on the walls. Honestly, Julian, they were a fire hazard. Just rolls and rolls of old paper. I had them recycled. They're gone. It's much cleaner now. Gone. She didn't just say she would move them. She said they were gone. The blueprint for the Golden Gate second deck proposal. The original structural drawings for the Columbia Tower. The preliminary sketches for this very house, the ones Clara and I had drawn together on a napkin laughing. 40 years of my life. My legacy. My work. My memories of Clara. Gone. Recycled. Treated like trash. I looked at Leo. This time he had to look up. His eyes were wide, panicked. He hadn't known. "Emily," he whispered, his voice cracking. You didn't. Not the blueprints." Emily shot him a look so venomous, so full of fury, that he physically recoiled. "It's done, Leo," she snapped. "It's just paper. We need to be practical." She turned back to me, her authority re-established. The queen was back on her throne. "So," she said, her voice dropping, losing all its fake politeness. "Here is the choice, Julian. My parents are moving into that room tomorrow. You can either be moved into the basement or you can find somewhere else to live. Pack your things and get out." Get out. Get out of the house I built with my own hands, the house I paid for, the house where I raised my son. The ultimatum hung in the air, vibrating with her malice. This was it. The final push. They were evicting me. Richard and Susan were already smiling at each other. Leo was pale, looking at his plate, defeated. Emily was watching me, expecting me to beg, to yell, to break down. She was expecting a 66-year-old victim. She had no idea she was looking at an engineer who had just seen the final stress test fail. The structure was compromised. It was time to activate the contingency plan. Old drawings. That's what she called them. Just paper. Recycled. She had no idea what she had done. She thought she had just cleaned out a room, but she had desecrated a tomb. That basement. It was never a basement to me. It wasn't a damp cellar for storing Christmas decorations and broken furniture. I had designed it specifically when we built this house. It was my studio. It had reinforced walls, independent climate control, and full-spectrum gallery lighting. It was the one place in this house outside of Clara's heart where my mind was truly at peace. It was my legacy. And she recycled it. Gone. The original schematics for the seismic retrofit I designed for the old city library. Gone. The conceptual sketches for the pedestrian bridge over the ravine, the one that won me the National Engineering Prize. Gone. The most painful. The original hand-drafted plans for this house. The ones Clara and I had hunched over for nights on end. I remembered her tracing the lines for the bay window, the one Richard now coveted. "This is where we'll watch the snow fall, Julian," she had said, her voice full of dreams. That blueprint wasn't just paper. It was a promise I had kept. And my proposal for the Golden Gate Bridge's second deck. It was the most ambitious project of my career. It was the work I was proudest of. It didn't get built, but the engineering world called it visionary. I had the full-scale original drawing framed on the main wall. It was a testament to 40 years of solving problems, of building things that last. Emily didn't see blueprints. She saw clutter. She didn't see a life's work. She saw a fire hazard. She hadn't just thrown away some paper. She had taken an eraser to my entire life. She had, with one casual, thoughtless act, told me that my 40 years of work, my passion, my identity, and my memories of the wife I adored were all worthless. They were garbage, just like the old fence, just like the old man who built them. This wasn't an act of ignorance. It was an act of malice. It was a power play. It was a strategic, calculated move to break me, to reduce me to nothing, to make me so small and so insignificant that I would just crawl into that now empty basement and wait to die. She had just confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a war. And she had just launched her most devastating attack. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally broken me. She didn't know that you can't break an engineer by destroying his old plans. You just force him to draw new ones. The room was absolutely still. The sound of Emily's ultimatum, "Get out," seemed to be physically hanging in the air, vibrating with malice. 4 pairs of eyes were locked on me. Richard and Susan looked smug, triumphant, already mentally measuring my master bedroom for their king-sized bed. Leo looked sick, his face pale and clammy, his eyes fixed on his plate, unable to witness my final humiliation. And Emily. Emily was watching me with a look of pure, predatory expectation. She was leaning forward, her eyes bright, a tiny smirk playing on her lips. She was waiting for the explosion. She wanted me to yell, to plead, to curse her. She wanted me to break down, to cry, to prove how weak and pathetic I truly was. Perhaps she was even hoping I would clutch my chest and collapse. That would solve all her problems neatly. I gave her nothing. I looked down at the table, at my plate of shredded, uneaten steak. Then slowly, deliberately, I picked up my heavy linen napkin. My hands. The hands that had drafted blueprints for 40-ton steel bridges were perfectly steady. There was not a single tremor. I began to fold it. I smoothed the fabric on my lap. I brought one corner to meet the other, creating a perfect triangle. I pressed the crease. Then I folded it again and again with the precision of an engineer checking a load calculation. Each fold was neat, exact, and final. I placed the perfectly folded napkin on the table next to my plate. Then I raised my head and looked directly into Emily's eyes. Her smirk faltered. Her eyes narrowed in confusion. This was not the reaction she had planned for. I was not following her script. I spoke. My voice was not the weak tremble of a defeated old man. It was quiet, level, and cold as steel. "Emily," I said, "you are right." Leo's head snapped up, his eyes wide with betrayal. Richard and Susan smiled, exchanging a victorious glance. "You are absolutely right," I continued, holding Emily's gaze. "Your parents, they need stability." I paused, letting the words settle. "And so do I." Her smile vanished completely. The confusion in her eyes was replaced by a flicker of something else. Uncertainty. "Give me 24 hours, I said. "I need to make my arrangements." I pushed my chair back. It made a slight scraping sound on the hardwood floor, the only sound in the room. I stood up. I didn't look at Leo. I didn't look at Richard or Susan. I held Emily's gaze for 1 second longer. She was completely baffled. She had prepared for a fight, for tears, for a tantrum. I had given her agreement. I had given her calm. And it terrified her more than any rage could have. I turned and walked out of the dining room. My silence was not surrender. It was not defeat. It was the sound of an engine starting. It was the first click of a well-oiled machine engaging its gears. My silence was the beginning of the plan. I walked up the stairs. My feet were steady on the oak treads I had installed myself. Each step was solid, silent. Below me I could hear the sounds of the house already resuming, the clinking of forks against plates, the murmur of Richard's voice probably congratulating Susan, the squeak of Leo's chair as he finally allowed himself to move. They were already moving on. They had dismissed me. I was a problem solved, a piece of old furniture moved to the basement. I reached my bedroom. My bedroom. The one I had shared with Clara for 41 years. I entered. The room was cool and quiet. Her scent was faint now, but I could still find it in the cedar-lined closet and in the pages of the books on her nightstand. Susan hadn't dared to reorganize this room yet. She had been saving it for herself. I walked to the door and I pushed the small brass button on the knob. The lock clicked into place. It was a heavy, satisfying sound. A sound of separation. A sound of a perimeter being secured. I did not pace. I did not wring my hands. I did not collapse onto the bed in despair. I am an engineer. When a structure shows signs of critical failure, you do not weep. You evacuate and you consult the contingency plans. My contingency plan was drafted 5 years ago, the day after Clara's funeral, even before Leo and Emily showed up on my doorstep. Clara and I were partners. We built a life and we built a fortress to protect it. She was a financial analyst. I was a civil engineer. We understood risk. I sat in the leather armchair by the window, the one Clara always said had the best light for reading. I looked out at the dark street. I didn't call a friend to complain. I didn't call another family member for sympathy. My grief was my own, and my plan was private. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I bypassed the main screen and went to a secure contacts list. There was only one name on it. Mr. Peterson. My lawyer for 30 years. A man as precise and methodical as I am. The phone rang twice. Julian. His voice was crisp, awake even at this hour. He was always prepared. I was hoping I wouldn't get this call. Good evening, Peterson, I said. My voice was as calm as if I were asking about the weather. I'm afraid the stress test has failed. The load-bearing structure is compromised. There was a half-second of silence. Peterson understood my language. I see, he said. The integrity of the asset is at risk. The asset has been fully breached, I replied. They have issued an eviction notice, and they destroyed the archives. This time the silence was longer. Peterson knew what those blueprints meant to me. I understand, he said, and his voice had lost its business-like crispness. It was now cold. The trigger condition has been met. Are you asking me to execute? I looked at a photo of Clara on the nightstand. She was smiling, her eyes bright, taken on the day we paid off this house. We had promised each other we would never be vulnerable. We would never be a burden. And we would never taken for fools. Peterson. I said, my voice clear and absolute. It's Julian. It is time to activate the Clara document. Are you certain, Julian? He asked, a final formality. Once this is set in motion, it is irrevocable. The asset transfers immediately upon your establishing new residency. I am 66 years old, Peterson, I said. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Activate it. I will secure the new residency by the end of the week. Very well, he said. The wheels will be in motion by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I am sorry it came to this, my friend. You don't build a dam hoping for a flood, Peterson, I said. You build it so you are ready when it floods. The flood is here. I ended the call. I sat in the quiet room. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a perfectly designed machine, finally precisely doing the job it was built to do. After the call with Peterson ended, I sat in the darkness of my room. The silence was complete. Downstairs, the battle was over, and they thought they had won. They were celebrating their acquisition of my bedroom. They were in their minds divvying up the spoils of a war they had declared on a defenseless old man. This was their fatal, catastrophic miscalculation. Leo and Emily see me, Julian, and they see an old man. They see a 66-year-old retired engineer in a worn-out sweater. They see my 10-year-old sedan in the driveway, the one I take meticulous care of. They see my simple, frugal lifestyle. In their minds, I am living on a meager pension and Social Security. I am a financial burden, a drain. In Emily's eyes, I am just a poor old engineer clinging to his last remaining asset, this house. They think this house is all I have left. How wrong they are. How dangerously, foolishly wrong. They see an engineer. They don't see the chief civil engineer who oversaw the seismic retrofit of the entire Pacific Northwest's public infrastructure. They don't see the man who consulted on multi-billion-dollar dam projects in South America. My pension isn't just a government check. It's a gold-plated executive package from one of the largest, most successful engineering firms in the world. A firm I helped build. But even my own career is only half of the story. The person they truly fatally underestimated was Clara. Emily saw my wife as a quiet, unassuming woman who played the cello and loved to garden. A simple, old-fashioned homemaker. She had no idea that Clara, my brilliant Clara, was a senior financial analyst with a mind like a steel trap. For 35 years, she worked for one of the most respected private equity firms in the country. Clara understood money in a way Emily, with her shallow obsession with property values and design shows, could never even begin to comprehend. We were a team. I built structures, she built wealth. We had a philosophy, Clara and I. We didn't believe in displays. We believed in foundations. We didn't buy yachts. We didn't join the country club. We didn't fly first class to Paris or Rome. We didn't buy a flashy McMansion in a gated community. We built this house solid and true, and we paid it off in 7 years. While our neighbors were buying luxury cars on credit and leveraging themselves to the hilt, Clara was investing. She was a quiet, disciplined, relentless investor. She called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. While everyone in the late 90s was chasing dot-com bubbles and day trading stocks, Clara was methodically, quietly putting our savings into broad market index funds, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, for 40 years. 40 years of 2 substantial executive incomes being saved and invested. 40 years of living humbly well below our means. 40 years of letting our money work for us quietly, silently in the background. Leo and Emily think I am poor. They think I am a dependent. The truth is, I am not just comfortable. I am not just well off. I am, as my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, would say, exceptionally liquid and extremely stable. The portfolio Clara built, the one I continued to contribute to, is a fortress. It is a diversified, unshakable foundation of wealth that Leo and Emily in their wildest, greediest dreams could not even imagine. This is what the Clara document is. It's not just a single piece of paper. It is a comprehensive, multi-layered financial trust managed by Peterson's firm. It is an engine of quiet, immense power. And they thought I was clinging to this house. They thought they were kicking me out so they could steal my only asset. They had no idea this house, this beautiful, solid house, is financially speaking little more than a rounding error in my portfolio. Emily's entire plan, her cruelty, her arrogance, it was all built on one foundational mistake. She thought I was poor. She thought I was weak. She thought she was robbing a pauper. She had no idea she had just declared war on a king. I slept soundly for the first time in months. The decision was made. The plan was in motion. I woke before dawn just as I always have. I did not rush. I showered, shaved, and dressed in a comfortable pair of slacks and a pressed shirt. I did not pack my life. I did not empty my drawers or strip my closet. Why would I? Those things were safe. I simply packed a single small suitcase. A change of clothes, my toiletries, my laptop, and the framed photo of Clara from my nightstand. Everything else of value was either in a bank vault or already digitized and secured by Peterson's firm. I walked to the bedroom door. I did not look back. I did not feel sorrow or nostalgia. I felt only a cold, clean sense of purpose. I walked down the stairs. They were all in the kitchen, just as I knew they would be. It was just after 8 a.m. Emily had made a special celebration breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice. A feast for the victors. Richard and Susan were already at the dining table laughing, holding coffee mugs as if they owned the place. Leo was there, but he was just staring into his cup, looking exhausted. And Emily was at the stove flipping a pancake, a little self-satisfied hum coming from her. They all stopped when they heard my footsteps. They turned. I was standing in the hallway, holding my small suitcase. Emily's face was a masterpiece of barely concealed triumph. Her eyes widened and a smile so bright it was almost painful flashed across her face before she could suppress it and replace it with a mask of fake somber concern. Leo, my son, just slumped. His shoulders dropped an inch. It was a movement of pure, unadulterated relief. The relief of a coward who has just learned he will not have to go into battle. He wouldn't have to choose. I had made the choice for him. He avoided my eyes, staring at the table as if it held the secrets of the universe. Richard and Susan just grinned at each other. The old problem was finally taking care of itself. I walked directly to Emily. I stopped a few feet in front of her. "Emily," I said. My voice was even. "You win." She put her hand to her chest, her performance beginning. "Oh, Julian, I don't know what you mean. We're not winning." "I'll be leaving," I said, cutting her off. "I'll be out of your way immediately." The joy on her face was so intense she couldn't hide it. It was like the sun breaking through a cloud. "Oh," she gasped. "Oh, Julian. Well, I think that's for the best. Don't you? It's the most reasonable decision." "Yes," I said. "It is." "I'm so glad you see it that way," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She was practically vibrating with happiness. She was getting my room, my house, and she was getting rid of me all in one clean stroke. Leo still hadn't looked up. He just sat there, a statue of filial failure. I turned to go, and "Julian," Emily called after me. I stopped at the front door, my hand on the knob. She said, and I could hear the condescending smirk in her voice without even seeing it. "I just hope you find a place. You know, somewhere. Suitable." I turned my head slightly. "Somewhere affordable," she clarified as if speaking to a child. "I know these things can be difficult. On a fixed budget." A fixed budget. She was picturing me in a tiny state-funded room. A single bed, a shared bathroom, the smell of disinfectant and despair. That's where she was sending me. In her mind, she was magnanimously allowing me to go to my sad little future. "I'm sure you'll be very comfortable, wherever it is," she finished. "I'm sure I will be, Emily," I said. I looked at her, at Richard and Susan, who were already pulling out paint swatches at the table, and at my son, who still refused to look at me. "You enjoy your breakfast," I said. I opened the front door. I stepped out into the morning light. I placed my suitcase in the trunk of my 10-year-old sedan. I did not look back. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and left them to their celebration. They thought they had won. They thought the problem was solved. They had no idea that the real solution, my solution, was just getting started. I drove away from the house I built. As I turned the corner, I didn't look back. Emily was at that very moment watching from the window, her heart swelling with victory. I knew exactly what she was picturing. She was picturing my drive. She saw me, a defeated old man, pulling my old sedan into the curved driveway of Golden Years Senior Living, or the Willow Creek Assisted Care Facility. She imagined me, suitcase in hand, walking into a small beige room that smelled faintly of bleach and boiled vegetables. A room my fixed budget, as she so kindly put it, could barely afford. Her condescending, "I hope you find somewhere suitable," echoed in my ears. That was the future she had assigned to me. That was the box she was putting me in. How little she knew. I didn't drive to the suburbs. I drove downtown. I bypassed the sad, sprawling nursing homes and pulled into the private underground garage of the Grand Residences. It's a sleek 40-story glass tower where a one-bedroom apartment rents for more than Leo's entire monthly salary. A valet took my keys. I took my single suitcase up to the 30th floor. I entered a 2-bedroom penthouse suite I had booked the previous night right after my call with Peterson. The apartment was all glass and brushed steel. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, unbroken view of the entire city. It was clean, cold, impersonal, and ruthlessly efficient. I did not go to the balcony to admire the view. This was not a vacation. It was a command center. I placed my suitcase on the king-sized bed. I walked to the heavy glass desk, opened my laptop, and connected to the high-speed secure network. I bypassed my personal files and opened an encrypted folder labeled Operations. Inside was the contact I needed. Ms. Bell. Not a friendly neighborhood realtor. Ms. Bell is the most aggressive high-end real estate broker in the state. She doesn't sell homes. She acquires properties. She moves millions in assets before most people have finished their morning coffee. I dialed her private number. She picked up on the second ring. Bell. Not hello, just her name. Ms. Bell, I said. This is Julian. We spoke last year regarding the commercial property on 5th Street. I heard the sound of typing, then a click. Julian, she recalled instantly. Her voice was pure business. The engineer. You went quiet. I assume you're not calling to talk about municipal bonds. No, I said. I have a new acquisition target. Residential. I need it done immediately. How immediately are we talking, Julian? End of the month. I want to be signing the closing papers by Friday, I said. The typing stopped. There was a half-second of silence. That's ambitious, she said. That's a 72-hour close. What's the property and what's the financial situation? The situation, I said, is cash. I swiveled the desk chair to face the window. My old house was miles away, but I could see it perfectly in my mind's eye. And more importantly, I could see what was directly across from it. The target is 415 Maple Drive, I said. The red brick colonial. The one with the white pillars and the second-floor balcony. I heard her type again. I know it, she said. Been on the market for 40 days. Nice structure, good bones, but it's overpriced. The owners are difficult, stuck in the past. They've already rejected 2 decent offers. They're about to have a very good day, I said. Here is the offer you are going to make to them. I want you to call them directly right now. I'm listening. You will offer them their full asking price plus 15%. This time the silence was longer. It was the silence of a shark that has just sensed blood in the water. 15% over, she clarified. Julian, the comps don't support that. It will never appraise for that value. It doesn't need to, I said. It's an all-cash offer. There will be no mortgage. There will be no appraisal. I paused, then delivered the final critical piece. And there will be no contingencies. None, she whispered. I could hear the excitement in her voice. No inspection, no financing clause. None whatsoever, I said. No inspection, no appraisal, no financing, no sale of another home. We are buying it as is. They get their full inflated price plus 15% on top wired to their account in 3 days. I didn't need to explain the logic to Ms. Bell. She understood the American real estate market better than anyone. In this economy, sellers are not just nervous. They are terrified. They are terrified of buyers whose financing falls through at the last minute. They are terrified of picky home inspectors who find a small crack in the foundation and scare the buyer away. They are terrified of deals being stuck in escrow for 6 weeks, only to collapse at the closing table. An all-cash offer is king. An all-cash, no contingency, 15% over ask offer. That isn't just an offer. That is a miracle. It is a gift from God. It is a winning lottery ticket. It is an instant, guaranteed, painless closing. The owners of 415 Maple wouldn't just accept it. They would weep with joy and thank their lucky stars. The 15% isn't to buy the house, Ms. Bell, I said, my voice cold and clear. It is to buy the speed. I have one final condition. What is it? I want to close in 72 hours. I want the keys in my hand by 5 p.m. this Friday. That is the only non-negotiable part of the deal. Tell them the offer expires at midnight tonight. Can you make that happen? I heard her laugh. A short, sharp, predatory sound. Mr. Julian, she said, for this offer and this commission I could get them to throw in their car and their dog. Consider it done. I'll call you back when it's settled. Don't go far. I hung up. I looked out the window at the city. Emily thought I was checking into a poorhouse, a final sad chapter of a finished life. I was in fact assembling my fortress, and I was building it right across the street. I let my old house sit in silence for the rest of Friday afternoon. I let them have their victory. I let Emily walk through my master bedroom, now empty of my desk and my memories, and I let her imagine her new paint colors. I let Richard and Susan settle in, believing they had won the war. I spent the afternoon at 415 Maple Drive with a team. Not a design team, but an installation team. While my old house was filled with the gloating of its new self-appointed masters, my new house was a hive of quiet, professional activity. A high-speed fiber optic network was installed. Security cameras were mounted discreetly, all of them aimed at my new property. And in the large second-floor room at the front of the house, the one with the beautiful balcony, my team was setting up my new office. They reassembled my heavy walnut desk. They did not place it against a wall. They placed it at my precise direction, directly in front of the sweeping floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a perfect line of sight. From my new desk, I had a clear, unobstructed command center view of the entire front of my old home. And specifically, I had a perfect view directly into their dining room window. By evening, the trucks were gone. The installers were gone. My new house was quiet, waiting. I sat in my new office in my familiar leather chair behind my walnut desk. The room was dark. The house was dark. Across the street, the lights in my old house were blazing. It looked like a party. I knew they would be in the dining room. Friday night was their celebration. Emily was finally officially the lady of the manor, and so I waited. I sat in the darkness, a patient engineer waiting for the precise moment to apply the pressure. At 7:30 p.m., I saw them. They were all gathered around the dining table. Emily, Leo, Richard, and Susan. They weren't eating, they were toasting. Emily was holding up a champagne flute, her face flushed with triumph. Richard was laughing, his arm around Susan's shoulder. They were toasting their new life, their new home, their brilliant success. Leo, my son, was there. He too was holding a glass. He looked drained, but he was participating. He was accepting the new reality. I watched them for a long moment. Watched them celebrate in the house Clara and I built under the chandelier Clara had picked out. "All right, Hector," I said, picking up my phone. Hector was the crew leader. He was now my on-site logistics manager, and he was waiting in the basement of my new house. "It's time. Power up the house, all lights, especially the office." "Yes, sir," he replied. I stood up from my desk. Across the street at 415 Maple, a house that had been dark for 45 days, a house that the entire neighborhood knew was empty and unsold, suddenly blazed to life. Every single light in the 5,000-square-foot colonial inside and out switched on at the exact same moment. The exterior floodlights illuminated the red brick. The landscape lights lit up the new, perfectly manicured lawn. And the entire second-floor office, my office, was lit up like a stage. I saw the reaction instantly, even from across the street. Inside the dining room, the laughter stopped. Leo was the first to see it. His head jerked up, his eyes drawn to the sudden, impossible blaze of light from the empty house. He stood up from the table. "What?" I could almost read his lips. "What is that?" Richard and Susan turned, annoyed by the interruption. Their annoyance turned to confusion. "What in the world?" Richard said. "I thought that place was empty. Who bought it?" Emily turned last, a champagne flute still in her hand. She looked and she froze. This was my moment. The moment my contingency plan was activated. I walked from my desk to the glass doors that led to the balcony. I slid one open. The cool night air hit my face. I stepped out onto the balcony, into the full bright glare of my own floodlights. I was perfectly, undeniably visible. I was holding a cup of tea, a simple white porcelain cup. The kind of thing I was never allowed to drink in the dining room because it didn't match Emily's aesthetic. Leo's hand went to his mouth. He was pointing. Richard squinted, his head craned forward. Susan's jaw dropped, her champagne glass tilting precariously. Emily? Emily just stared. Her face was a mask of pure, absolute, uncomprehending shock. She was looking at the old, frail, dependent man she had kicked out of his house, the man she had sent to a cheap nursing home on a fixed budget. And that man was standing on the balcony of the most expensive house on the street, looking back at her. I held her gaze. I held the gaze of all four of them, frozen like statues in my old dining room. I did not scowl. I did not gesture. I simply raised my teacup in a polite, neighborly toast. And then I gave them a small, pleasant wave. A welcome to the neighborhood wave. I stood on the balcony, my teacup in hand, and I watched. Across the street, the scene in the dining room had frozen. The laughter, the celebration, the triumphant toast. It all stopped as if someone had hit a pause button on their lives. They were four statues bathed in the bright light of my old dining room, staring at the impossible. Susan, Emily's mother, was the first to fail. Her hand, the one that had been complaining about her poor back, flew to her throat in a gasp. But this was not one of her fake theatrical performances. This was real. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The champagne flute she was holding, the one she had raised to toast her new life in my bedroom, simply tilted. It slipped from her fingers. I didn't hear it break from across the street, but I saw it. I saw the champagne splash across the front of her expensive blouse. I saw the glass shatter on the hardwood floor. She didn't even look down. She just kept staring, her face a mask of chalky disbelief. Next was Richard. Richard, the man who was going to manage my house. The man who had coveted my master suite for its morning light. He didn't gasp. He exploded. What in the... His whole body jerked as if he'd been stung. He stood up so violently, his heavy oak dining chair scraped backward and toppled over with a crash. I saw it fall. Is that... It can't be, he roared, jabbing a thick, trembling finger in my direction. What is he doing? That house, that's the Miller house, that's impossible. He took a stumbling step toward the window, his face turning a deep, apoplectic purple. He was a man whose entire world, a world where he was at the top, had just been inverted. He saw me not as a person, but as a problem, a thing to be managed. And his thing was now in a fortress, looking down on him. His bluster, his entitlement, it all evaporated, replaced by a sputtering, impotent rage. He couldn't process it. The poor old man was not supposed to have this kind of power. Then my eyes found my son, Leo. Leo didn't move. He didn't drop his glass. He didn't stand up. He just shrank. He looked in that one horrifying moment like a ghost. He was as white as Susan, but his was not the shock of disbelief. It was the shock of recognition. The sick, dawning horror of a man who knows with absolute certainty that he has made a catastrophic, life-altering mistake. He wasn't just seeing his father. He was seeing the father he had abandoned. He was seeing the man whose life's work he allowed to be recycled. He was seeing the man he had sold out for a quiet life and a steak dinner. And he was realizing that the man he betrayed was not a weak, senile dependent. He was a man of immense quiet power, a man who had just checkmated him without saying a word. Leo's eyes met mine across the dark expanse of the street. I saw in them not just shock, but terror. And worse, I saw a profound, bottomless shame. He put a hand on the table as if to steady himself. He looked like he was going to be sick. He had chosen his side. And he had just discovered in the most public and humiliating way possible that he had chosen the losing one. And finally, Emily. She was the last to move. She just stood there, her champagne flute still held halfway to her lips. She hadn't dropped it. She was frozen in time. I watched her face. As an engineer, I have watched structures fail under stress tests. I have seen the hairline fractures appear, the bolts shear, the foundation begin to buckle. I was watching the exact same thing happen to Emily's mind. First, there was simple, blank incomprehension. It was just an image. It didn't make sense. Her brain was trying to categorize it. Julian, balcony, that house. The data was contradictory. It was impossible. Then came the confusion. How was this possible? The money. The fixed budget. The nursing home. Where did he get the money? That house was worth millions. Then the confusion gave way to a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. Her face darkened. Her eyes fixed on me narrowed into slits of absolute hatred. I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped her glass. She had been tricked. She had been lied to. The old man had cheated. He had been hiding money. He had dared to outsmart her. And then the final stage, the one I had been waiting for. The rage collapsed into horror. The full implication of the moment hit her all at once. It wasn't just that I had money. It was that I was here, across the street, watching her. I hadn't just escaped. I had become her jailer. Her every move, her every guest, her precious curb appeal she was so obsessed with. I would be there from my second-floor throne to witness all of it. She who had made me a prisoner in my own home was now a prisoner in hers. Her entire sense of superiority, her entire identity was built on the belief that she was the smartest person in the room, that she was in control. My wave, my simple teacup, had just publicly, silently, and devastatingly proven her wrong. I saw the color drain from her face. She was paler than Leo, paler than Susan. Her mouth opened and a sound came out. A horrible, high-pitched sound, like steam escaping a bursting pipe. A sound of a system in total catastrophic failure. The champagne flute finally slipped from her hand. It shattered on the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes, still locked on me, rolled back in her head. She shuddered once. She swayed on her feet. She put a hand out, grasping at the empty air. And then Emily, my arrogant, triumphant, victorious daughter-in-law, collapsed in a heap on the dining room floor. She had fainted. I stood on my balcony in the cool night air. I did not smile. I simply took a calm, measured sip of my tea. Phase 1 of the plan was complete. I turned from the balcony and stepped back into my office. I closed the glass door, shutting out the cool night air, but not the sounds. Even from across the street, I could hear the chaos. A muffled shout. That was Richard. A door slamming. Then silence. I walked over to the built-in cabinet and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was perfectly steady. I knew they would come. It was the predictable next step in the structural failure. It took them less than 3 minutes. I heard the pounding before I even saw them. Not a polite knock. Not the ring of a doorbell. A frantic, animalistic pounding on the heavy oak door of 415 Maple Drive. Boom, boom, boom. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated panic. The sound of a world that no longer made sense. I calmly walked down the curved staircase. The pounding continued, echoing through the empty foyer. Boom, boom, boom. Julian! Open this door! I know you're in there! Open it now! Emily's voice. No longer smooth and condescending. It was a raw, ragged shriek. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I took a moment to straighten the runner on the floor. I am a man who appreciates order. I opened the door. They stood on my new porch, framed by the bright lights, looking like refugees from a disaster. Emily was in front. Her hair was wild, strands had fallen loose from her perfect arrangement. Her face was a terrifying mask of white rage and splotchy red. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot. She was breathing in short, harsh gasps. Leo was just behind her, holding her arm. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. His face was ashen, his suit jacket was rumpled, and he was trembling. He looked for the first time in years truly and completely terrified. Richard and Susan were hovering on the sidewalk, not yet daring to step onto my new property, just staring with their mouths open. Emily's eyes raked over me over the grand foyer behind me, the curved staircase, the gleaming hardwood floors, the crystal chandelier. Her mind was trying to process the impossible. "You," she sputtered. "You, how? What is this?" Leo found his voice first. It was a hoarse whisper full of a desperate childlike confusion. "Dad," he said. "Dad, what are you doing? How did you do this? Did you win the lottery?" I looked at my son, my 40-year-old son, who had stood by and watched his wife mentally and emotionally eviscerate me. "Dad, where did you get this money?" he demanded, his voice cracking, rising in panic. You lied to us. You were broke. You've been lying to us all this time. The accusation, the final predictable defense of a guilty man. I was the liar. I was the one at fault." I looked at him, my gaze as cold and level as a builder's spirit level. "I have never lied to you, Leo," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through their hysteria. "I have never once told you that I was poor. That was an assumption you and your wife made." I paused, letting the truth of that statement land on him. "You assumed I was a burden," I continued. "You assumed I was weak. You assumed I had no resources." I turned my gaze to Emily. She was trembling, but with rage, not fear. I said, chose not to share my private financial information with people who treated me with such profound disrespect. People who saw me as a gnat to be swatted. People who destroyed my property and tried to kick me out of my own home. I looked back at Leo. "I didn't lie, son. I just maintained my privacy, something I was never afforded in my own house." I stepped back, holding the door open a little wider. "This," I said, gesturing to the foyer, "is my new house, Leo. Welcome." And my words settled in the space between us. "Welcome." Leo just stared, his mind clearly shattered by the revelation. He was a man adrift, the entire foundation of his reality. His belief in my weakness and his wife's strength gone. He couldn't speak. But Emily was built from harder, uglier material. I watched her face as she processed my words. I saw the shock. I saw the profound, visceral humiliation. She, who prided herself on being in control, had been outmaneuvered publicly and devastatingly. But beneath the shock, something else was rising. The humiliation wasn't breaking her. It was hardening her. It was calcifying into a dense, pure, spiteful rage. She violently shook off Leo's hand. She planted her feet on my new porch. She physically straightened her spine, pulling her shoulders back. The color rushed back into her face, a blotchy, angry red. And then she laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was a dry, grating, ugly sound, like stones grinding together. "Okay," she said, her voice shaking with this new terrifying arrogance. "Okay, Julian, fine. You win this round." She took a step toward me, her eyes narrowing into slits. She was trying to regain control, to find a new angle, a new way to hurt me. "So you had a secret," she spat. "A little, secret pile of money. You've been hiding it from your own family. How pathetic. How predictable." She looked past me into the grand foyer and sneered. "You bought a big, empty house. Good for you. You know what that makes you?" She smiled. It was the same familiar, condescending smile she had worn at the dinner table. She thought she had found her footing. She thought she had found my weakness. "It makes you a lonely old man in a big, empty house." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper full of venom. "You can sit over here in your new kingdom, Julian, all by yourself. Because Leo is my husband. He's not going anywhere. He stays with me. She glanced back at Leo, who flinched, as if she had struck him. She had just re-established her dominance over him right in front of me. She turned back, her confidence flooding back. She thought she had found the winning move. And honestly, she said with a shrug, her voice casual again, this actually works out better for us. We were dreading the ugly legal fight to get you out. She smiled a wide, predatory, shark-like smile. But now, you've left. You've moved out. Voluntarily. You've just solved our single biggest problem. My God, the sheer blinding arrogance. She still didn't see it. Now, she said, her eyes lighting up with that familiar hungry greed, we can finally do what we wanted to do all along. We can sell that old drafty house across the street. She pointed back at my home, at Clara's home. It's worth a fortune in this market, she said, practically vibrating. A fortune. We'll sell it, take every penny of that cash, and we are gone. She was glowing now, radiant in her new revised victory. We're moving to Florida, she announced as if it were the final victorious checkmate. A beautiful condo on the beach. You can sit here in your cold, empty museum and watch us leave. You can't touch us. You can't stop us. We'll be rich. She looked me up and down, her face a mask of triumphant pity. So thank you, Julian. She finished, her voice dripping with poison. Thank you for the asset. You finally made yourself useful. She stood there on my porch, radiating her new revised victory, planning her life in Florida, spending the money from the sale of my house. She was so confident, so arrogant, and so completely, utterly blind. She was savoring her final vicious words, thank you for the asset. She believed with every fiber of her greedy heart that she had won. She thought my moving out was a mistake, a foolish emotional act of a senile old man. She thought she had just exploited a loophole she didn't understand. My leaving wasn't a mistake. It wasn't surrender. It was the trigger. It was the key. It was the final necessary move in a game she never even knew she was playing. And this was the moment the curtain finally comes down. This was the water building up silently behind the dam, and she was the one celebrating in the valley below. She thought she was closing a deal. She had no idea she was about to be served. Emily stood there, bathed in the glow of my porch light, her face radiant with her imagined victory. She was already in Florida, spending my money, laughing at the old fool she had left behind. Thank you for the asset, she had said. I let that horrible, triumphant silence hang in the air for a beat. I let her savor the taste of it. Then I smiled. It was not a large smile. It was a small, precise, cold smile. The smile of an engineer who has just watched his calculations prove correct. That's a lovely plan, Emily, I said, my voice quiet. Florida, a condo. It sounds wonderful. She held her triumphant gaze, but a flicker of uncertainty entered her eyes. My calmness was as always unnerving to her. There's just one problem with your plan, I continued. What's that, Julian? She scoffed. That you'll miss us. The problem, I said, is that you can't sell that house. Her sneer froze. What did you say? You can't sell the house across the street, Emily. I was patient, as if explaining a simple structural problem to a new intern. It doesn't belong to you, and it doesn't belong to Leo. Leo, who had been standing there like a ghost, finally looked up. Dad, what are you talking about? It's your house. No, son. It was my house. I turned my gaze to him, and I made sure he understood. It is not my house, not anymore. Emily let out a sharp, ugly laugh. Oh, I see. What is this, a last pathetic attempt to scare us? You're going to, disown him? It doesn't matter. The house is in his name, isn't it, or yours? We'll fight it in court. We'll bleed you dry. You can't fight it, Emily. I said, because the house is not and has never been in Leo's name. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, it is no longer in my name either. The color was starting to drain from her face again. The confusion was coming back. What are you talking about? That's impossible. Who owns it? Do you remember Leo? I said, speaking directly to my son 4 years ago, when you and Emily came to me completely broke, when you had lost everything on that Arizona investment. Leo just nodded, his face pale. You were being pursued by creditors. You were terrified. And I told you I would protect you. I told you I would give you a safe place to live. I turned back to Emily. You see, Emily, I knew even then who you were. I knew what your ambition really was. I knew that giving Leo any part of my assets would be like handing a match to an arsonist. So I took steps. I protected my house. I protected Clara's house. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, the jacket I had worn from the hotel. I had my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, draft a document. We called it the Clara document. Its legal name, however, is the Clara Memorial Irrevocable Trust. Emily's eyes narrowed. A trust? Yes, I said. An irrevocable family trust. That means once I signed it, I couldn't even change it. 4 years ago, I transferred the full, unencumbered deed of that house, the house you are currently occupying, into this trust. Leo's mind, the accountant's mind, was finally working. But we lived there. You lived there. How? The trust, I explained, was very specific. It was designed by my late wife, who was, as you may have forgotten, a brilliant financial analyst. The trust named me Julian as the life tenant. The life tenant, Leo whispered, the dawning horror appearing in his eyes. He knew what that term meant. Exactly, Leo, I said. It meant that I, and only I, had the legal right to live in that house, use that house, and control that house for the rest of my natural life. It was my home, but it was not my asset. It was protected from my debts, your debts, and anyone else's greed. It could not be sold. It could not be leveraged. It could not be touched. Not by me, not by you, and certainly not by her. Emily was shaking her head, trying to find a flaw. No, that doesn't make sense. You're still alive, so you're still the life tenant. So you just left. You abandoned it. That just makes it ours. Ah, I said. I gave her that small smile again. This is the part you'll find interesting. This is the genius of Clara's design. The clause, the specific trigger clause in the trust, was very, very precise. I looked at Emily. It said I was the life tenant with full use of the property until one of 2 conditions was met. 1, my death. Or 2, my voluntarily and permanently establishing a new separate residence. The blood drained from Emily's face. She finally understood. She looked at my new house, at the grand foyer behind me, at the deed in my hand. You see, Emily, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, when you told me to get out last night. You weren't just being cruel. You were giving me the key. You were handing me the trigger. I held up the single document I had pulled from my pocket. It was the fully executed, countersigned, and recorded closing document for 415 Maple Drive. The moment I signed this document at 9 a.m. this morning, I said the instant I legally established a new permanent residence, I voluntarily triggered the dissolution clause of the trust. As of 9 a.m. today, I said, my life tenant status evaporated. The trust automatically and irrevocably activated its final directive. Leo was shaking his head, whispering, No. Emily was speechless. Her mouth was open, but all the arrogance, all the fire was gone. She was just a hollow shell. You're wondering who the house belongs to now, aren't you, Emily? I said. You're wondering where your asset went. As per the instructions of the trust, the instant I was no longer the life tenant, The full, unencumbered title of 120 Maple Drive was transferred to its one and only beneficiary, the American Heart Association. Leo made a small, choking sound. The place where Clara was treated, I said, my voice hardening. They were notified of the asset transfer at 9:01 a.m. They were, as you can imagine, thrilled. They intend to sell the property at public auction immediately. All proceeds will fund the new Clara Memorial Cardiac Research Wing. I looked at Emily, her face a mask of utter catastrophic ruin. Mr. Peterson's office. I said, sent the official legal notice of eviction to the property this morning. You are as of this moment illegally trespassing. The new owners, the hospital, have graciously given you 30 days to vacate the premises. I looked past her at Richard and Susan, who were still standing on the sidewalk, frozen in disbelief. That includes you, Leo, I said. And you, Emily. And your parents, too. 30 days. I stepped back into my foyer. Now, I said, if you'll excuse me, this has been a very long day. Good night. And I closed the door. It's been a month. I sit in my new office, the one with the perfect view. The morning sun streams through the balcony doors, warming the walnut desk. I am drinking my coffee, the same simple black coffee Clara and I always preferred. Across the street, the scene is different. There is no professional moving crew. There is no gleaming white logistics truck. Instead, a battered orange and white U-Haul truck is parked awkwardly at the curb, one wheel on the grass. It's the smallest one they rent. The one you get when you have no money and no friends to help you. The new owners, the American Heart Association, have been very firm. The 30-day deadline was today. I watched them, all four of them. Richard and Leo are trying and failing to maneuver a heavy sofa through the front door. Richard's face is a furious shade of purple, and he is shouting at Leo, who just looks exhausted and numb. Susan is standing on the lawn next to a pile of black trash bags, wringing her hands and shouting at Richard. And then there is Emily. She is not carrying anything. She is standing by the U-Haul, her arms crossed, her hair a mess. She is wearing sweatpants. She is screaming at all of them. Screaming at Leo for being weak. Screaming at Richard for dropping his end. Screaming at the sofa for being too heavy. They look tired. They look beaten. The arrogance, the smug triumph, the condescending smiles, all of it is gone, replaced by the ugly, petty bitterness of failure. They are fighting over the scraps, and they have no one to blame but each other. I watch them for a moment, this chaotic, dysfunctional quadrangle of greed. I see the sofa leg catch on the doorframe, and I hear Emily's shriek of rage carry across the street. I take another sip of my coffee. The auction is next Tuesday. I hope the hospital raises a great deal of money. As I watched them, I remembered a visit from last week. Leo had come to my new house. Alone. He didn't pound on the door this time. He just stood on the porch looking small and defeated. He had been crying. He stood in my new foyer, twisting his hands, unable to meet my eyes. He apologized. He cried. He said he was sorry. He said he was weak, that he was scared of Emily, that he didn't know what to do. He said he never meant for any of it to happen. I listened to him. I listened to all of it without interruption. When he was finished, I poured him a glass of water. You are not weak, Leo, I told him, my voice not unkind, but firm. Weakness is an absence of strength. You are not that. You are a man who made a choice. He finally looked at me, his eyes red and confused. You just made a choice, I repeated. You chose comfort over loyalty. You chose an easy life over a right one. You chose your wife's ambition over your father's dignity. That isn't weakness, Leo. That is a decision. And now you are living with the consequences of that decision, just as I am living with mine. I handed him the water, and with it I gave him a small piece of paper. This is the number for a very good therapist, I said. He helped me after your mother passed. I suggest you call him. That is your next choice to make." He took the paper. He didn't come to see me again. I turned away from the window. I closed the blinds. The circus of their failure was no longer my concern. I walked through my quiet new house and went out into my new backyard. It was peaceful. The afternoon sun was warm. I sat on a stone bench, took a small notepad and a pencil from my pocket, and I began to sketch. I drew a line firm and straight. I drew a post and a joint and a top rail. I was designing a new fence, a solid, strong oak fence with the exact same details, the exact same craftsmanship as the one Clara and I had built together. A structure built to last. I am 66 years old. I lost my wife, and in many ways I lost my son. But I have found myself. I did not seek revenge. I simply enforced the terms and conditions of a well-designed plan. As Clara always used to say, a good structure, Julian, will always bear its own weight. I looked at the clean, strong lines on the paper, and for the first time in 4 years, the silence around me was truly, completely peaceful. This whole experience taught me a hard lesson. Respect isn't just a courtesy. It is the absolute foundation of every relationship. When people mistake kindness for weakness or silence for senility, they are making a critical error. True strength isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about having a contingency plan. It's about protecting your dignity, your assets, and your peace. Never ever let anyone, not even your own family, make you a guest in your own life. Always have a Clara document, a plan that ensures your security and enforces the boundaries that others try to tear down. What would you have done in my situation, and what steps are you taking to protect your own legacy